Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to basically completely dismantle the way we measure human progress.
Yeah, it's a pretty massive intellectual swing we're taking today.
It really is. We are digging into this fascinating 2026 white paper from the Equity Network, and it's called the Universal Equity Engine.
Right, and this document essentially argues that we should scrap our entire traditional concept of money. Just throw it out.
Exactly. I mean, it proposes replacing fiat currency with this single universal mathematical formula based on the golden ratio.
Which sounds totally wild right off the bat.
It sounds crazy, but it attempts to score the true value of literally everything, like from a sovereign nation all the way down to a sports car.
Or a loaf of bread, yeah. Authors are trying to engineer a literal mathematical replacement for global finance.
Right. And to understand why this paper is making such huge waves among, economists and technologists, we kind of have to think about the absurdity of our current baseline metrics.
Oh, absolutely. The baseline is so flawed.
Like, you probably already know this, but when a massive hurricane wipes out an entire coastal city, destroying homes, ruining livelihoods, causing absolute devastation.
The local GDP actually skyrockets.
Yes. The massive rebuilding effort, the insurance payouts, the construction contracts, all of that registers as economic growth.
Right. So the metric looks at a literal disaster zone and basically declares it a booming success.
Which is just so backwards. Okay, let's unpack this because the paper frames this entire deep dive around a universally relatable concept.
You have to throw it down to the basics of human experience.
Exactly. It points out that whether you are listening to this right now as a software engineer in Stockholm or you're a rice farmer in Cambodia, every single one of us is ultimately optimizing for the exact same thing.
We're all just trying to maximize the life and the happiness that remains after our basic survival costs are paid.
That's the core of it. We just want freedom and happiness.
Right, because you aren't optimizing for the accumulation of paper notes,
Yeah.
You're optimizing for what that ledger balance actually enables: your health, your time, your autonomy.
But our current economic tools like GDP, the Consumer Price Index, market capitalization, they don't measure that lived experience at all.
No, they just measure the sheer volume of transactions. They completely ignore the quality of the actual outcomes.
Which brings us to, well, the broken rulers of modern economics. The white paper spends its whole first section just tearing down these legacy metrics.
And they do a very thorough job of it,
They
too.
really do. The example of market capitalization really jumped out at me. Like, you look at the stock market today, and a tech conglomerate can boast a market cap of $3 trillion.
Which sounds like the pinnacle of human achievement.
Right. But then you look closer, and the actual warehouse workers or the retail employees generating that value for the company, they often literally cannot afford basic housing in the cities where they work.
Because market capitalization is purely a reflection of investor sentiment. It's just anticipated future profit.
It has zero correlation with intrinsic human worth.
None at all. Or the actual societal stability that the company generates. And, you see the exact same structural flaw when you look at inflation metrics like the CPI.
Oh, the Consumer Price Index.
Yeah, right, because it measures the price movement of a fixed basket of goods. But those baskets are constantly adjusted by political pressures.
And they vary wildly depending on where you actually live. You can't use it to compare the lived reality of Tokyo to the lived reality of Nairobi.
You really can't. It's apples and oranges.
Honestly, reading this critique, I couldn't help but think of an analogy for this. Measuring global prosperity in these inflated, constantly manipulated dollars.
Which are always shifting, yeah.
It's exactly like trying to track your weight loss, but the scale you're standing on randomly switches from pounds to kilograms to ounces, depending on what a central bank decided to print that morning.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. You never actually know if you are getting healthier or if the unit of measurement is just warping underneath you.
Exactly. The ruler is broken.
The authors actually call this the trap of measuring the ruler with the ruler. Because fiat currencies are inherently unstable, so any value derived from them is just a shifting illusion.
So I totally buy the theory. But this brings up a massive practical problem.
The now what problem?
Right. If we throw out the bathroom scale of fiat currency, what do we actually measure? How do you quantify the value of a society without using dollars or euros?
Well, the paper says you decompose human value into two independent, measurable dimensions.
Okay, so breaking it down into two forces.
Exactly. They label these courses prosperity and friction.
Okay, let's start with prosperity.
Think of prosperity, or P, as the forward momentum of a system. This captures the aggregate positive outputs.
So things like purchasing power, life expectancy, educational access, personal freedom.
Right. It represents the total energy available for human flourishing.
And then you have the counterbalance to that, which is friction, or F.
Yes, the systemic drag on that flourishing.
So poverty, inflation, corruption, income inequality, environmental degradation. It's the resistance that's just constantly eroding your prosperity.
What's fascinating here is they insist these two forces must be measured completely independently,
Why is that so important?
because you cannot simply net them out on a single balance sheet. Consider a highly wealthy but deeply corrupt petrostate, for example.
Okay, so they have massive wealth.
Right, so its absolute prosperity score is very high, but its systemic friction, the corruption, the lack of civil liberties, the severe inequality that is also massive.
So under this equity engine framework, what happens?
That friction acts as a multiplier that heavily drags down its overall equity index, or EI.
Ah, I see. While on the flip side, you could evaluate a much more modest, maybe less industrialized community.
Exactly. They might not have skyscrapers or a multi-trillion-dollar stock exchange.
So their absolute prosperity is lower on paper.
Right. But if their systemic friction is almost non-existent, say they have low crime, high social trust, really equitable resource distribution.
They could actually achieve a surprisingly high equity index score.
Exactly. It fundamentally re-ranks the world. It transforms the whole metric from just a sterile economic indicator into a comprehensive value judgment system.
Because it evaluates economies not by how much capital they spin up, but by the actual life they produce relative to the systemic pain they impose.
It's judging the net human experience.
But hold on, if I'm the one tasked with scoring a country, I'm immediately stuck. Because prosperity is entirely subjective.
It is, yeah.
My idea of freedom or happiness might be vastly different from yours, or someone living in Singapore, or someone living in Brazil.
Of course.
So if we don't standardize this, isn't it just totally arbitrary weights?
Yeah.
How does the paper solve the subjectivity problem to combine P and F into a single universal score?
This is where the authors turn to the mathematics of nature. They introduce the universal equity formula, which is just remarkably elegant.
Lay it on me.
The formula states that the equity index equals P divided by the sum of P plus F over phi.
Okay, wait. Phi being the golden ratio, roughly 1.618.
Yes. And they are very deliberate in explaining that this isn't just a clever, arbitrary math trick they came up with.
Right, the golden ratio is everywhere.
It is the foundational proportion that nature uses to balance growth with structural harmony. They cite phyllotaxis.
Which is the way leaves arrange themselves on a stem, right?
Exactly. They range at exact angles of 137.5 degrees to maximize their exposure to sunlight without shading the leaves below them. It is literally nature's optimal packing solution.
You really do see it everywhere once you start looking. The spiral of a nautilus shell, the proportions of human facial features, the branching of our lungs.
The paper even touches on how it appears in the critical states of quantum mechanics.
Mhm.
It's the universal signature of balance.
Because in every physical system, phi represents the precise point of equilibrium between competing forces.
Exactly. And to ground this, think of fluid dynamics. Think of the Navier-Stokes equations.
Oh, like trying to run as fast as you can through a swimming pool.
Perfect example. Your leg muscles provide the forward momentum that is your prosperity.
But the water pushing back against your legs is the viscous drag.
And that is your friction. The economy works exactly the same way.
Okay.
The formula balances the forward momentum of prosperity against the viscous drag of scaled friction.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, but I have to push back on this formula for a second.
Sure, go for it.
Because the math is doing something very specific that feels completely counterintuitive to me. Why is the friction divided by the golden ratio in the denominator?
Ah, I see what you're asking.
Like, why not just treat prosperity and friction equally? If a society's prosperity is a 10 and its friction is a 10, shouldn't those forces just cancel out to a 50-50 break even?
It is a really vital question, and it speaks to the actual biological reality the authors are trying to capture here.
Okay, how so?
They scale the friction down, dividing it by 1.618, because a completely balanced system where the struggle exactly equals the reward is still a net positive experience for a living organism.
Oh, wow, I see. So even if life is a massive struggle and the friction is really high, the simple act of being alive and moving forward still holds inherent positive value.
Exactly. A unit of prosperity contributes fully to the system, but a unit of friction only contributes about 61.8% of its face value as drag.
So it mathematically defines the true break-even point for human value. It is not a 50-50 split.
No, the equilibrium point is mathematically defined as 61.8 to 38.2.
That's wild.
For a system to achieve true equity, its prosperity must exceed its friction by that exact golden proportion.
And if your score drops below 0.618,
Then it means friction is dominating. It means the mere act of survival is consuming too much of your energy.
that is just profound. It literally bakes the resilience of the human spirit directly into the math.
It's beautiful, really.
But we still have the messy data problem, right? Like, how do you take these lofty concepts and plug them into this beautiful equation so that you can compare vastly different things without bias?
They handle this through what they call the 4x4 basket architecture.
4x4 basket. Okay.
Right. So for any entity you evaluate, you build a basket of 4 prosperity indicators and a basket of 4 friction indicators.
Okay. 4 of each.
And within each basket, the indicators themselves are weighted using the golden ratio.
Let's make this concrete for the listener. Walk me through a real-world example of how this basket system actually works in practice.
Sure. Let's imagine we are evaluating a piece of fast fashion, say a $5 t-shirt.
Okay, a keep t-shirt. Got it.
For the prosperity basket, the primary indicator, which carries 61.8% of the mathematical weight, might be affordability.
Makes sense.
The 3 secondary indicators, which share the remaining 38.2%, could be aesthetic design, durability, and availability.
So because it is cheap and highly accessible, its prosperity score might actually look quite high.
Right, it does its job well on the surface, but then we hit the friction basket.
Ooh, right. The dark side of fast fashion.
Precisely. The primary friction indicator, again carrying 61.8% of the weight, would be labor exploitation.
Ugh.
And the secondary indicators might be water waste, carbon footprint, and microplastic pollution.
So suddenly, all this massive friction generated by sweatshop labor and environmental damage just completely overwhelms the system.
Exactly. When you plug that massive F into the formula, the overall equity index of that t-shirt completely tanks.
And the 61.8% weighting on the primary indicators completely prevents gaming the system.
Oh, absolutely. A company can't just offset their terrible labor practices by, making the shirts slightly more durable or using recyclable packaging.
Right, because the primary friction drags the whole thing down.
Furthermore, all of this data runs through cross-sectional normalization.
Okay, what does that actually mean in plain English?
It means you are always scored relative to the global baseline, not in a vacuum.
Okay, so it's a relative score.
Right. So if a country scores a 0.7 in educational access, that 0.7 represents their exact percentile rank against every other country on Earth at that specific moment.
Oh, so it prevents grade inflation over time.
Exactly. A 0.7 means the exact same relative position whether you are analyzing Norway, which sits at a massive equity index of 0.99, or a developing nation like Nigeria. The ruler is universally calibrated.
Wow. And the way this normalization applies to global trade is perhaps the most aggressive part of the entire white paper.
The supply chain part, yes.
They introduced the supply chain EI penalty, which is huge.
It is a game changer.
So when a product is manufactured in one country but sold in another, the seller's equity index is multiplied by the maker's equity index.
Right.
So if a multinational corporation relies on exploitative labor in a low-equity economy, but sells those goods in a high-equity market, the mathematics severely penalize the final score of the good.
It completely eradicates the illusion of outsourced harm. By mathematically linking the origin to the destination, it makes the hidden friction of globalized production entirely visible.
It quantifies the ethics gap.
Perfectly said.
But let's look at the scope of this for a second. We just talked about a t-shirt, and earlier we talked about sovereign nations.
Yeah, the scale is massive.
How can you possibly use the exact same formula to compare the value of Bitcoin to the country of Norway, or a luxury sports car to a loaf of bread? Well, because the things you and I value in a sports car are totally different from what we value in our groceries.
And the authors accounted for that. This is handled by the Product Equity Index, or PEI.
Okay.
The underlying architecture, the golden ratio, the 4x4 baskets, the normalization, all of that stays identical. But the meaning of the indicators shifts to reflect the lived experience of that specific category.
Oh, I see. So they swap out the variables depending on what's being measured.
Exactly. The math of value is universal, but the human experience of value is contextual.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. So if we are evaluating the automotive category, prosperity might be measured by driving joy and safety, while friction focuses on emissions and supply chain labor.
But if we shift to the agricultural category for that loaf of bread,
Then prosperity is nutritional density and caloric affordability, while friction evaluates pesticide runoff or the housing deficit of the farm workers.
wow, the system is just infinitely modular.
It is a brilliant piece of engineering.
It really is. But let's be fiercely realistic here for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
We have this perfect engine that calculates true value. But a score alone doesn't change the geopolitical world. It's just another dashboard.
Right.
Why would a corrupt superpower or a massive conglomerate benefiting from the current system ever agree to adopt a token that mathematically punishes them for being exploitative?
They wouldn't want to.
Exactly. They would just refuse to use it. How does the system plan to actually replace fiat currency and fix the global economy?
That is the ultimate hurdle, without a doubt. And the paper addresses it through game theory and the mechanics of the equity token, or ET.
The equity token. Okay.
To understand the token, you first have to understand the Global Equity Index, the GEI.
Which is the global average, right?
Yes, it's the population-weighted average of all country-level equity indexes mapped over the last 76 years.
And the data there is just wild. The paper notes that while global GDP grew by over 800% during that time, the global equity index remained incredibly flat.
So flat.
It just oscillated in this tiny band between roughly 0.62 and 0.71.
Which proves the metric is immune to financial inflation. Real structural human progress is just agonizingly slow.
Because eliminating the final 5% of global poverty is exponentially harder than addressing the first 50%.
Exactly. The stability of the GEI isn't a flaw. It is the cryptographic anchor of the new system. The equity token is a digital currency pegged directly to this global average.
So one ET always equals the global equity index.
Yes.
Meaning no central banks, no quantitative easing, no speculative trading manipulating the supply.
None of it. The value of the money supply is determined purely by the aggregate state of human progress.
Incredible.
Now, to address your point about why a corrupt superpower would actually adopt it, they wouldn't do it out of morality. They would be forced into it by economic gravity.
Okay, how does that work?
The white paper outlines a mechanism called the race to the top.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. Like, if I hold one ET, how does the system incentivize my country to behave better?
It operates as a dynamic exchange protocol. In this framework, the purchasing power of an ET is modulated by the local equity index of the nation where it is being spent.
Okay, so local score matters.
Right. If a nation successfully lowers its internal friction, say, by drastically reducing corruption or expanding healthcare, its national EI goes up.
And because the global ET token is pegged to the universal average, a higher local EI acts as a positive multiplier.
Exactly. Suddenly, goods imported into that country become mathematically cheaper. Capital flows in because the yield on investment in a high equity zone is stronger.
So it totally inverts the current global paradigm.
Completely.
Because right now, countries deliberately devalue their own fiat currencies to make their exports cheaper. It's a race to the bottom that actually hurts their own citizens' purchasing power.
Right. But under the equity token, the only way a government can increase the wealth of its nation is to actually improve the lives of its citizens.
That's just, wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer brilliance of the framework is that it does not require human beings or multinational corporations to suddenly become altruistic. It weaponizes self-interest.
And they channel greed through the golden ratio.
Exactly. And you see this exact same mechanism applied to consumer goods through what they call the Fair Price Oracle.
Which is like a rating service.
Yeah, it operates as a decentralized rating service. Companies submit their supply chains for independent assessment.
The text uses a smartphone as an example, right?
Right.
If a company like Fairphone submits their device and achieves a product equity index of, say, 0.72, they are mathematically proven to be more equitable than a competitor's phone sitting at a 0.45.
And because consumers and institutional buyers are operating within the equity token network, the phone with the 0.72 score actually costs less systemic energy to purchase.
So corporations will desperately compete for higher PEI scores simply because it gives them a pricing advantage in the marketplace.
Exactly. Greed becomes the actual engine for ethical production.
So bringing all of this immense macroeconomic theory back down to earth, what does this mean for you, the listener?
Yeah, how does it affect the individual?
The paper closes by introducing the Individual Equity Index, or IEI, And it essentially asks you to apply this exact same universal formula to your own life.
It really demands a personal audit. It asks you to weigh your personal prosperity, so your physical health, your skills, your community support, against your personal friction.
Which would be your debt load, your commute time, your cost of living
Right.
stress.
Because under this framework, money is no longer absolute.
A $10 bill means fundamentally more to someone operating under high systemic friction than it does to someone with low friction.
It makes the valuation of capital deeply, uncomfortably personal again.
It strips away the illusion that a dollar is just a dollar. It forces us to acknowledge that value is entirely relative to the burden of our lived experience.
It really does.
And that brings us to a final provocative thought for you to mull over as we wrap up today. The Fair Price Oracle promises radical, unavoidable transparency.
It promises a world where the hidden friction of every single product is finally exposed.
Imagine walking into a store or browsing online, and every single item you look at instantly reveals its exact human and environmental cost via a definitive mathematical score.
The ethics gap just laid completely bare.
Exactly. So my question to you is this. If you were confronted with the undeniable mathematical proof of the suffering required to make your favorite products, would you actually change what you buy?
Or would you just learn to live with the guilt of a low equity score?
It is the difference between looking at an X-ray of a broken bone and actually doing the painful work to set it right. This equity engine turns the lights on. It shows us exactly where the fractures in our society are. Now we have to decide if we actually want to heal them.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the true value of the world around you.